I know what my artistic mission is. I know who I am as a personality, and that's going to be pervasive throughout everything that I do. So if people can't get on board with that, or they think for some reason that being a teacher means you can't do something, then they're not people I want to be associating with.
Yeah. Welcome to Let's Opera, Claire Galloway and Julia Radosz. Thanks very much for joining me. You are both operatic sopranos, you're freelance. Claire, you were born in Philadelphia and you're now based in Baltimore, where you're also teaching at the Peabody Institute. And Julia was born in Dallas and is now based in Bratislava, Slovakia, here in Europe. When we entered the first lockdown about a year ago, um, you reacted very quickly and turned the crisis into an opportunity, I think. You have since then successfully established yourselves as voice teachers in the online world. Now, my first question is, what is the difference between your teaching models and the traditional one-on-one tuition offline?
Well, actually, so when a year ago when the pandemic hit, just in all transparency, I was already teaching online since 2015. So already 5 years completely. But I did transition my studio in the interim between 2014 and 2015. So I had a very large in-person studio at that time. And I would say for me, the biggest change was in all of a sudden going, because I took my studio online that I had previously had in person. So for about a couple years, that's who I primarily taught. And then when I moved out to California, I added some in-person people to that roster. Then I left California. So at some point, all the people I had worked with extensively in person and then taken them online. But by about 2016, end of 2016, I started getting new clients, and they were people I had never heard in an actual in an actual acoustical space. So brand new. And to me, that does present a different challenge because you have to listen in a very different way. So I wasn't having my ears as a reference to what they sounded like in a room. And developing that, like, there are certain things that you really can't know online, but they're not technical things, weirdly enough. They're more things in concern about rep and about actual voice size in a theater.
Yeah.
But what I did learn was that in terms of technical issues, those you can hear very easily online because they're related a lot of times to phonation, breath use, and there's a funny phenomenon online. I don't know if you have this too, Claire, is when because it's so naked, it's so exposed, like you don't hear the ambiance of the room or any of the bloom of the sound. You could actually hear exactly what's going on, almost in a truer way than in real life. I'm not going to say it's better than having a lesson in real life, but it's definitely a lot more naked. I always call this like looking at the voice under a magnifying glass. When you go into one of those pour mirrors and you're like, oh my God, is that what it looks like?
Yeah, that's true.
To me, that's the biggest difference.
Would you agree, Claire?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Julia. I think you can hear a lot of those flaws kind of popping out. I also am very much a physically based teacher, and that's based off of my own studies. So I do a lot of watching. So if I feel like my ears are kind of deceiving me, or maybe the internet connection isn't the best that it could be, and things are kind of lipping around, you know what I mean? You can still kind of see things that are going on with the posture and the way that the singer is breathing, or maybe you see some jaw tension or something happening in the neck. There are all kinds of things that you can see, even if you can't hear the best, and you know how they're affecting the sound. So that's something that's been incredibly effective with online teaching that I didn't necessarily expect. And I will say I had some experience learning online, although not teaching, because my teachers have been teaching via Skype and FaceTime for a very long time, just for really short periods of time, like 15-minute lessons.
Oh.
And the other thing was the idea of being able to approach lessons in a different way. And I know this is something that Julia had already been kind of exploring before the pandemic, but sort of subscription series, monthly payments, 6-month package payments, and offering more than just those one on one moments, whether those were libraries of music or tracks or group sessions, things like that. That was a whole new world to me as we started to move online.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. That was very unusual in the offline community.
Right.
Now, of course, there are lots and lots of freelance singers and freelance artists in general who are now really struggling and having a very hard time in Corona times. And I'm assuming that it's not the same experience for you. Does your online teaching actually give you this, financial stability that everyone must be desiring right now?
For me, it really does. I I mean, before, like I said, before the pandemic, I was already teaching online. So when I would, but I would say it was a little bit, it was just on one-on-ones at that point. So, I could work it around a rehearsal schedule, or I would just, cancel students for a week here and there. But I would say that during the pandemic, in terms of developing the group programs, that's changed things quite dramatically for my business. So going from only one-on-ones to the group programs has been like a godsend. And I know, Claire, it's been kind of the same for you as well. And it gives you an opportunity to reach a whole new group of people, because some people aren't necessarily looking to replace their current voice teacher,
Right.
but they're looking to expand their vocal knowledge and add something different. So that's what I think the group programs allow.
Yeah, sure. Now that all sounds really great, actually. It gives you a certain freedom. You don't have to leave the house. Money comes in. What would you say is the hardest part about this kind of job?
I think there's a few different aspects, one of which is this whole idea of launching any kind of program, because in many ways, a lot of these programs existed, but not necessarily in the arts field. So, in many ways, we're kind of forging our own path. And there's not many people that we can go to and say, how do I do this? And we did find a lovely group of musicians and artists that we could go to and ask their advice. But there's no sort of prescribed, this always works, especially for the different audiences that Julia and I especially, are trying to connect with, because we both know that we have a very targeted group that we want to communicate with and work with. So it's the whole process of identifying who those people are that we're going to connect the best with and who we're going to be able to help the most, and then finding ways to actually do that, connect with them and talk to them not only about how we can help them, but what their needs are, and see how that might shift our own missions. So I think that that's the biggest thing, and just continuing to kind of keep ourselves consistent and out there and engaging and communicating.
If you could maybe, is there a certain percentage that goes into that kind of work, like launching and being out there, as opposed to actual teaching? What would you say, Julia?
To be honest, I think in this time that we're in, it's really important to have a strong internet presence. And I think that regardless of whether you're just wanting to teach one-on-ones or go into more package based, you're going to have to start putting yourself out there, because the market is now getting saturated, which it wasn't 5 years ago in terms of the online space. And B, people are realizing they don't have to just study with somebody in their town. So now you're competing globally, essentially.
Yeah.
So even if you just want to teach one-on-one lessons, I think it is important to continuously put yourself out in a way, whether you're launching a group program or not, you may want to follow the same steps.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it is a huge opportunity, but also there's huge competition right now, right? Mm-hmm. And you can't stop putting yourself out there, basically, I'm guessing. Now, I would like to talk about a little bit about your identity as an entrepreneur and teacher, as opposed to being a freelance singer, are you sometimes concerned that this might interfere with your reputation as a singer in the operatic world? Do you keep your profiles very separate, the one as a teacher and the one as a singer, for instance? And are you maybe sometimes afraid that you might not be taken seriously by the music industry if you show your other side? Claire, would you like to start?
Sure. I will say that those fears pop into my head every once in a while, but I very much, over the past year especially, but even before then, had decided, I know what my artistic mission is. I know who I am as a personality, and that's going to be pervasive throughout everything that I do. So if people can't get on board with that, or they think for some reason that being a teacher means you can't do something, then they're not people I want to be associating with.
Yeah.
So I'm done trying to separate it all. I think that it's made me a better artist, quite frankly. And yeah, I would say it's who you are. And if people can't accept that, then they're not for you.
How about you, Julia?
Yeah, it's interesting that when you were phrasing the question, Britta, that you said, do you separate yourself being a teacher and an entrepreneur from being a freelance singer? I would say I do separate myself being an entrepreneur from being a teacher and a singer. So the teacher and the singer part of me is very much the same, that I don't ever feel is at odds with itself. I do feel that I personally, on a social media presence, keep my stuff separate, but that's more from a marketing standpoint than for any kind of, like, I have no qualms about, being connected. I just think for my own self, it's been a little bit more helpful for me to keep my websites and social media profiles separate for these purposes.
So that makes it easier for somebody, if they search your name, for instance, to understand what is actual performing and what is teaching, right?
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, I do put some clips of myself singing on my Voice with Julia YouTube, but very few. And I don't typically put any teaching stuff on my singer YouTube channels and all of that. But I do think that that's more for, especially, as you know, Britta, in Europe, things are a little bit different. And so if I'm sending my website off to a European company, it just makes it a little easier for them to understand and navigate than to have, I have so much content on Voice with Julia, it would just inundate the whole website and they'd be like, what am I looking at? So
yeah, I feel the same. Like, I'm not hesitating to show, for instance, my artistic director side and my singer side. But yes, it's about making it a little easier for the audience to find where they need to go when they are looking for a certain product, so to speak, right? Which doesn't mean we have to split our identity. Right. And now my basically last question would be, how would you like to continue with these different branches of your professional life once the stages are, open again? Claire.
I mean, I've really enjoyed teaching online, so I'd love to continue to have at least a portion of my studio online so that I can continue teaching people who aren't in my direct vicinity. The people that I've been teaching since the pandemic began, many of them I have never met in person, which is very cool. And I know Julia's experienced this too, but that was new for me. So I'm looking forward to continuing having online programs, having online voice lessons, having online content. And I also really think that it's likely that opera companies will start to experiment with a little bit more of this technology side. And I don't necessarily mean that they're going to be doing live virtual productions all the time, overdoing live real productions, but they might start using more technology. They might start recording things and releasing them in sort of episodic forms, kind of like Netflix, which is something I've been wanting them to do for years. So I'm looking forward to what all of these experiences over the past year will lead to when it comes to innovating how we experience and just sort of consume opera in the art form.
Yeah. And Julia?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I'm probably going to keep my business. It's going to stay pretty much the same. I think the major differences are going to be coordinating with the schedules of the people in the program, because most of them are professional singers, so they're going to be going back and singing. So scheduling will become an issue again, and whereas now it's a little bit easier. I think for myself too, I'll be performing, so be, kind of working around that, but I don't see much change happening, because I do think people realize that now there is a whole world out there, and being on the internet doesn't mean it's like a less than proposition. So yeah, I'm really, to be honest, I'm looking forward to singing in a theater again with just like low tech experience. The orchestra, just like no microphones, no cameras in your face. Like, I'd love it to never be recorded. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I am looking forward to that after Corona. But I'm also a big believer that you just have to be flexible, because life is going to change. Things are going to, and if you're not flexible, especially with your own mindset, but also with your business, you got to change, because you're never going to grow if you don't change. So in terms of forecasting what's going to happen, I have no idea, but I can guarantee you I'll probably be doing something slightly different, and we'll just have to see what that is.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll stay tuned. Yeah, but I think what you just said about change and being open and being able to adapt is really something that will be so valuable, I think, also for the entire music business. If everyone also feels a little more financially independent, a little more independent as an identity, as an artist, and that just enables us to interact more freely, sorry, and yeah, and just go with the flow and make the best of it. I would like to thank you very much, and wish you good luck for the next few months, and yeah, fingers crossed for everything.
Absolutely. Thanks for having
Thank you so much, Britta. Thank you.
Thank you.